San Juan Bautista, que parece que no es nadie, ¿no? Es un profeta de Israel que no, que no es ni un hombre fuerte, ni tiene ejército, ni tiene nada, y parece que es el único enemigo del tetrarca. Dices, ¿cómo puede ser que, que la verdad de Dios, las cosas de Dios,
The truth of God, the things of God, suffer attacks from the enemy. And St. John the Baptist is the one they attack. They want the head of John the Baptist on that platter. The gospel says you have like the three different positions. You have Herodias, who shows herself as the open enemy of the truth. And a different person was Herod. Herod is joking around with John the Baptist. He listens to him, he considers him to be a righteous man. And what he says, he thinks it's interesting, but then he doesn't change his life. So there are people who, when they find the truth of God, they listen to it with pleasure. It's interesting for them, but as long as they're not asked to change their life. And then with the passing of the time, before we said there's like three different positions. Atheism, which is to close yourself on your beliefs, and then there's this middle position of the agnostics. It seems almost like that's what's most prudent, most balanced. But then in the case of Herod, he was going to be in the trial of Jesus. And he's brought before Herod, and when Herod finds Jesus, he says, "Won't you do a miracle for me?" And Jesus doesn't even respond to him. He remains in silence. It's as if he says, like, why are we going to waste time if you're not interested in the truth? And this is impressive because Jesus could have convinced anyone, but he can convince those who want to be open. So I was thinking how the position of saying, well, I'll try to be prudent, sometimes this hides like a hardness of heart. And there's not true desire of the truth. It's just like trying to fool oneself. Sometimes behind this position, this neutral position, this Gnosticism, what is hidden is cowardice. Man has the obligation to seek the truth and the good. He can't just say he lives in permanent ignorance without having a sincere interest in looking for the truth. And so the problem of God, the problem of the sense, the meaning of life, is not something secondary. It's the essential truth. So this renouncement of wanting to think, of wanting to justify the truth and say, oh, this is impossible, is not impossible. And so one of the things that the Catholic Church always defends is the truth of the human reason. And for us, faith is given to us by revelation, but this same faith does not exclude reason, but it shows itself to us in this search for the truth, because faith is reasonable. It's not the fruit of a syllogism where you have to believe necessarily, but reason leads us to the faith. There's a comment related to this in the chat. Father Jose Luis can answer the question. Pilar says, I'm a believer and I practice the faith, but I think that existence of God is not something that can be demonstrated mathematically. Human reason is able to reach the existence of God. The letter to the Hebrews, chapter 1, says that we're able to reach God naturally. It's not a hidden truth. It can be difficult, and the reason isn't the easiest way to get to God. I had a subject about this when I studied to be a priest, and there's a classmate who wasn't religious. He was a Greek. This guy would ask lots of questions. And the teacher was really good as well. And he introduced us into these subjects about how to reach God through reason. And this guy said, no, but you have your life, your reason, you want to be objective, and you're not able to. But little by little, it was beautiful to see how he did open himself to. But there's this, the openness of the heart is necessary. You have to be docile and let yourself be changed. But the teacher said that there's other paths. There's a shorter path, which is that of the witness of Christians. When you see the love of others, he gave us an example. When you see a saint, you can say, why does he live so differently? Why do they have this security, this peace? Why do they love even their injured? This is because God exists. This is the same type of man as I, but he has this strength because God exists. So there's other paths to reach God, which isn't reason, but reason can arrive on its own. And as to whether reason can come to know the existence of God, Father José Luis quoted the letter to the Hebrews, which says it very clearly. And there's also the Book of Wisdom, and I think it's the First Vatican Council that says the Holy Mother Church sustains and maintains that God, the fundament and beginning of all things, God can be known with certainty by the natural light of reason. And that's defined in Vatican I. It's a dogma of faith that God can be known by reason, the existence of God. But the next question is, why did God reveal himself to us? Why, if God can be known by reason, why did God reveal himself? That'd be a step forward in this process. When we went to found in Alcalá de Henares, a neighbor had a photographic studio, and he would ask us questions. He was an atheist, and he said, I would like to have faith because my life would be a lot easier. I see your life, and I was like, oh, that's a beautiful life, you're happy. But I don't have faith. It's a gift. I don't have the gift, and I don't have faith. And I think God reveals himself in its truth that you can reach through your reason. And God reveals himself so that we can come to know God in fullness. Reason can't know everything about God. And that's what he reveals in Jesus Christ. But I remember that the definition Father Raphael gives us is a man's response to God who reveals himself. And it's a gift, but man also has to respond to that gift, and he has to look for God, and he has to adhere himself to this gift that God gives him. I would like to use this comparison. I see this watch, and I can assure certainly that there's a watchmaker who made this watch. I don't know him. But one day, I knock on the door, and I open it. He said, good evening. I'm José Luis Pérez. I'm the guy who made this watch. I have 3 children. But I didn't know about the watchmaker. He reveals it to me. He tells me what he's like. And so, by the natural light of the human reason, we can know that there's a creator, but we can't know that that creator is 3 persons, that one of them has become man. If we open the door to God, and then we'll have faith. Faith is a gift that God gives, but Jesus also says whoever seeks finds, who knocks the door is opened, but you have to really look with interest and with fidelity. Our human reason, even though it's able to get to know God, but our reason has been wounded by sin. And so in this darkness, it's hard to reach the plenitude of revelation, the moral law. And that's why God has revealed certainly, with certainty, so that we can know without error the fullness of truth about Him, about the commandments, about ourselves, about our eternal destiny. But on the other hand, we see a coherency. What Sister Maria said, this need, this thirst for God, this whole, this incomplete being, a man who seeks God. You made me, O Lord, for you. There's something within man that tends towards God, that seeks God. Because if we were created in God's image, His being is written in us, and man by nature tries to look for the meaning of his being. Another sentence, I don't know if it's from St. Augustine, he says when theologians tried to climb the mountain of truth, they found that theologians were at the top, eating coffee and cookies, when philosophers tried to climb the mountain of truth. So it's hard with one's reason to reach the truth. And marriage is indissoluble, open to life. Reason can climb and try to reach the truth. And you lose, and lots are lost on the way. But God reveals it, and you're at the top. And you say, thank you, Lord, because you give it to us. He gives it to us, and it helps us, and He gives us a sure path. And with our reason, we can say, look, if this is the goal, this is the path, so we can help others, we can do this. Revelation is something that is good for us. It's a liberation. You could say, faith, the only thing that, faith is just a bother because now I have to go to Mass on Sunday. In reality, faith permits you to be free. It permits you to love. It permits you to think correctly, not to be locked in little things that harm you. Because God sees us and loves us so much. He reveals Himself to us to bring us to plenitude. So Father Jose Luis, God reveals some things that reason can't reach, that are above Him. We couldn't know that God is a Trinity. But He also reveals things that reason can reach, so that there's no doubts. So we can understand that to kill is wrong, but God says thou shalt not kill, to make sure there's no doubt, or that to steal is wrong, but God says thou shalt not steal. God helps us with these two things. So maybe we can sing another song, and then we'll continue with our reflection and respond to the question better, because there's one aspect that I don't think we've responded to yet.
Haz que mi fe sea pura, sin reservas, que inunde mis pensamientos y mi modo de juzgar. Haz que mi fe sea humilde, que no presuma, tema, que se fortalezca en la prueba, que sea firme en tu verdad. Haz que mi fe sea gozosa y que dé paz y alegría, que la irradie a los demás con continua esperanza. Señor, Dios mío, yo creo, mi Dios, mi todo, aumenta mi fe. María, Madre de la Fe, la luz de mi sendero. María, Virgen fiel, sosténme en mi sí. Señor, Dios mío, yo creo, mi Dios, mi todo, aumenta mi fe.
Bueno, podemos aprovechar también para presentar algunos libros.
We can take advantage of what as well to present some books. They're in Spanish. We'd have to see. I'm not sure if they're translated. I'm gonna see. The two books that are published in Spanish, but they're not published in English. But this author presents how the same, like science, shows that God exists. You know? Many times they say that they use the science against faith, the reason against faith, but everything indicates, and the science indicates, like, the existence of God. In the Second World War, one of the last offensive attack that one of the Allies made was a suicide missions, and it's from the American side, and he wrote, it's the necessity to make a mission that seems like a suicide mission, and the understanding that it's probably that it's not going to change how the war will end, but they throw themselves into this, you know. And so that's a comparison a little bit. Some people have compared that with the faith right now and the science, that it seems like we're fighting. It seems like the others are winning, you know. And there's another book that I wanted to mention as well, but I don't have the title right now. And one of the things I did want to talk about is how the faith isn't, it's not mathematical, you know, I do this and I get the faith, no. But I do want to speak about how the faith is reasonable. It's not absurd to believe. It's not like something, a vision that disappears like a mirage. No, it's not something like projecting on the reality. No, it's something that I can also trust in this. I can believe this. It's credible. And so when we draw close to the person of Christ, if we hear the gospel, we see what he says, who loves his parents more than me isn't worthy of me. Before Abraham existed, I am. Like, saying what he's saying, we're saying this guy is crazy, or it's true. Like, or he's crazy, or it's true. You can't say something in between that. You have to value, like, how was his life, how was his psychological qualities, his morale, the miracles that he did, the signs, the resurrection. There's nobody has resurrected someone who's been dead. Like, you can't. And the apostles, the same apostles didn't believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Saint Thomas had to tell him, like, if I don't put my finger in your wounds, I don't believe it. And so our Lord, we have to see, like, all of those same witnesses demonstrate that there's something more there. No, that's like a test, a sign. But there's even people who have seen the resurrection of people who are dead, and that doesn't, like, provoke the faith in some people. They're so, like, closed. And so we can see that there's just an aspect that is reasonable, but at the same time it's also a gift, you know. And so we see, like, the key of the faith, you know. It's not simply believing that God is three people, the Trinity. You know, And so I'm going to take advantage to clarify something of Feuerbach, who's a theologist, and he said that God is like the projection of myself, you know, and that's not true, no. It's impossible that a man projects the image of a God that's a Trinity, you know. It doesn't enter in, and it's like a parent. It's a pause that I just want to clarify something there. If it was just to believe that God exists and He's like that, because many people can believe that. It's just like a series of things that I have to believe in that might cause a certain emotion within me, but nothing else. They don't mean anything else. But when my belief provokes a demandingness and a need in my moral life, it's different. You know? There's a faith that's very comfortable and a faith that's very uncomfortable. You know? One of the things Father Jesus is saying, Father Jesus is saying, and there are things that is impressive because even the same enemies of Jesus recognize the signs that He did, miracles that a man can't do. They recognize it. But man, we always like seek a way to escape from that truth that it obliges me in a moral way of life, so that I don't have to live that. And so, for example, when He cured the paralytic, the Pharisees said, they didn't say who cured you. No. They don't say that. They say, who is the man who told you to carry your bed? I don't know how we say it in English. I'm sorry. Like, who is the man who told you to carry that? It's on a Saturday. It's a Sabbath, no. And so they accused Him of breaking the Sabbath, and they didn't recognize the miracle. Mary Angels is asking, and so the first question is they're saying are there souls that are special with graces, special graces to be able to reach God? And then the second question is, Sister Betty can respond to this first question. God loves all mankind, no? And so she he's saying like all of us are loved by God, and there are certain saints, certain mystical souls that have known, like have that privilege to know, like mystical graces to know God, in a special way. And there are also graces that some souls receive that has been beneficent for the entire church, for Padre Pio, his participation in the Passion of the Lord, his stigmas, his levitations, his bilocations, all of those things, those gifts that he had. Those are extraordinary symbols. And why are they? Why does he have them? It's like reclaiming in a society that's so like material and based on the human reason, and he's like a symbol of the existence, like God exists. You know? Can they repeat the question for me? And he's like, if we could talk about the existence of the Trinity, I'm sorry. And he's talking, and it makes me remember the story of Saint Augustine, who, when he was walking on the beach, and he saw, like it was a dream, or a vision, I'm not sure, but he saw a child that was making a hole in the sand in the beach, and he walked by, and he's asked the child, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm trying to fit the sea. I want to make a hole so that the sea, all the water of the sea, can go in this hole." And St. Augustine, "That's ridiculous. Why are you doing it? It's not possible." And he said, "That's what you're doing." The boy said to him, "That's what you're doing when you're trying to understand the Trinity." No. And so it's like an example of like God is so great that he can't enter. Like we can't completely comprehend him. We can't completely understand him. No, he's more than us. And now he's explaining that, like the processions of the Trinity, you know, and explaining like how the Son proceeds from the Father, and the love between the Father and the Son is its own person, or it's this loving created. Right? He's explaining that Trinitarian procession, you know, and how that superates, like that's above our understanding, though, because my love isn't a person, though, whereas in God, and he's saying now he's saying like, then like how the family is also like an image of the Trinity, because they're different persons who are called to form a unity, you know, and a religious community is also called to be like the unity of different persons in una sola, like in one unity, you know. And so those are images of what the Trinity, you know. And God is a great artist. And so since he's such a great artist, he creates that image of the Trinity and all of like that we see in our life, you know. And so if our life is Trinitarian, as an author said, if you change the Trinity, many Christians, if you change the Trinity to 2 people or 4 people, that wouldn't mean anything to them. You know, and he said that's a pity, because it's like essential in our faith. And for example, in the Trinity, the Father is always donation, no? And in a family, the Father isn't always that way, no? And I'm not gonna do so much like propagation like publicly. I don't wanna like too much. But there was a documentary that just came out in Spanish recently, yesterday, about Saint Louis, of the King of France, you know, and it's very well done, and there's this documentary. you see St. Louis, he made like a holy church to receive the relics of our Lord. And in this chapel, if he's saying that like instead of making the chapel, if he had like changed the things to like food, it would have been, well, he would have been like very comfortable, no? But instead of like serving himself, what he did is he strived to be a good example for his people. It was a life that's sacrificed. It's worth saying it, no? It's free of charge. It's on YouTube in Spanish. And so that God is, the Trinity is a life of donation that can't leave us like indifferent. That has to be like a sign for us, has to be an example for us, no? Why is there so much like so much resistance to believe in a Trinitarian God? Like why are they so against it? Here is the no, it's worth saying the documentary. Was they're saying I'm gonna put here the link to the documentary on the chat. The only problem is that it's still in Spanish only, though. But we see in the life, the holiness of life takes our life out of the corruption that the original sin has provoked within mankind, you know. And what Sister Bailey is saying is that many times many people aren't willing to take the step to believe in God because they're not willing to make a change in their life. Because if I believe in God as the God of the Christian God, that means I have to change how I'm living. And not willing to make that change. Many people say, it's good to believe in God, but I don't have to like get him to do so much, no? And Sister Maria is saying, it affects us a lot to think, like, what will they think about me? Or it's like a different time of life, no? Like that was what they did believe, what they did years ago, but now it's not the way we live, no? And it's to realize it's not, we see that they don't understand what it means to live our faith, you know? They say it's something like apart from my life. It's an aspect of my life, a small, like it's like it's like an etiquette, like something that I have, an aspect of my life, but it doesn't define my life, you know? It's like one more thing that I do, one more hobby, one more aspect, you know? And when I think also like this, when they think about serving God, that means like us, it requires humility. And since mankind, since first original sin, we have the first sin was a sin of pride. And so it's very hard for mankind to be humble and recognize that he should serve God, no? And so your Father Felix is saying you're remembering that first sin, that sin of also the fallen angels that said, I will not serve. Sister Bailey is saying many, many times there are many people who don't know God, and so they have their own image of God, and they reject that image of God, that false image of God. It's a God that doesn't exist, but it's a God that they think it is, no? So since they don't have the true image of God, they reject God. And so there's difficulty about those false image of God. I was thinking more about like what happened with two Muslim girls that I found in Alcalá in Madrid, and I don't remember how the conversation began, but they said to me, one of them said, Sister, I can't sleep at night for the fear that I have of God. The Christians, you guys are very lucky because you believe in a God who's love, but I believe in a God who's vengeance. And so God is going to have, I believe in this God that's going to have vengeance upon me. And so like, the Christians, when we have an image of God who's love, I can't reject the God who's love. And that's the truth. That's why it's so important to have a true image of who God is. The God who revealed himself, you know. And so he's saying many people have this false image of God who's like a God of pure justice and vengeance. And they live in fear. And this other guy, image of God, who like he just like the guy who makes a watch and a clock, and he leaves that clock alone. No, God has made us. He left us alone to see, like he's indifferent towards us. You know, and so it's so necessary to see who is God really. God who's surrenders Son, His only begotten Son to us, gave His life for us on a cross. And so it opens us to the true idea of God, of a God who is donation and giveness, He gives of Himself. And I was with a few young people who were in the youth Eucharistic Marian Youth Day here in Spain, and they told us how they had that experience of God, because they said that like, we had the Catholic formation, they had CCD classes, catechism classes, but they'd never had that experience of God. And so being in that youth day, they said it was like an experience with that God, like they had that personal experience. And they said from that reason, like apart from that, or like since that moment, they have to go to Mass, daily Mass, because they realize like God really exists. It's not just something that I know, like a fact, an information. It's something that I've experienced, with that knowledge of what is the experience. And we've spoken about this in other moments in the meetings that we have. But this desire to reach God. Sister Maria is talking about those young people. But look, but there's also many older people who have had that experience of God when they're older, and they say, how lucky the young people who have that experience of God and they believe in God since they're young. No, take advantage. And so we talked about in the beginning, how we have to think, we have to realize and see, and we have to reflect, because our way of life with so many like, how do you say this? It's going so quickly many times. It doesn't give us time to reflect. It doesn't give us time to think about those great questions. Who am I? Where am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? There's an eternal life. What's after death? Like the mystery of death. That mystery of death that always, every man, every person has to confront that. Am I made just to die? My destiny is just like a black hole? Or is there something else? Is there something greater than that? If we have to think about that, we have to think about those solid questions of what is to be man, that we've been created, the capacity to think, to reflect. Those fundamental questions we have to plan, we have to reflect about those, we have to present them as well, to help people to think about that, and to find the truth, And Sister Mary is saying it's like someone who denies the truth. It's horrible, because the entire life they're confronting the reality of what they're like, they find themselves before these questions, and it's a constant like battle. For example, how can you believe in the reincarnation and not believe in that God exists? There are things like God is rational, but the reincarnation isn't rational. Eternity exists. I'm made for eternity. There's justice. All of those, they believe in things that aren't rational, and they don't reflect to find the truth. Just to think about the reincarnation, that they always come back to the same world, always back to the same world, always back to the same world, the same thing, and they don't grow. They don't realize that there's something more out of this world. They descended themselves in this world. Then we have to see it like how they found all of those ideas. These ideas that aren't rational, no? That aren't rational. Whereas the faith is rational, no? The same way we have to reflect and we have to ask ourselves, and we have the right to ask questions, and we have the right to seek that the faith is rational. And so we have the right to ask, like, can you sustain this idea or not? He's saying that many times for those ideas that are so strange, they demand a blind faith more than what Jesus himself, God himself, asks of us, a faith that is rational. It's truly rational, because our faith never is against what is reasonable, no? Well, this is great. We're gonna try and summarize a little bit like the ideas that we've had in this meeting, so we can leave like them clearly of everything that we've talked about in this meeting. Sister Bailey, you're very synthetic, very short, exquisite. Look, mankind, human person has, since he's been created, in the entire history, we always see that mankind has the need to find himself with God, to look for this being that's greater than him, that's above him, no? And God comes to that encounter of mankind and reveals himself, so that mankind, the human person, can discover God in his plan, in fullness, no? In that fullness, even though we can discover God with our faith, we discover the fullness of who God is. Even though we can discover God for a reason, no, the reason itself, but through the faith, we're able to discover Him in His fullness, And so he's citing the first council of Vatican Council as a dogma of faith, saying that God sustains and defends that God can be discovered with just like the only existing God can be discovered with just the reason, with human reason. That's without the need of faith, To discover the fullness of God, the faith is necessary and it's a gift. But it's a dogma of faith saying that we can discover God just with our faith, And he's saying that the atheist, when he has like the, you say like a glass of wine, in the beginning of the glass of wine, he says that God doesn't exist. But at the end of the glass of wine, he's hoping that God does exist, That's what Pasquale says, He's saying to say that this world exists without God is like saying, like when you pass by a place, a junkyard, with a bunch of metal, and like a huge wind comes, a tornado comes, and it organizes all that metal to form an airplane. It's saying the same thing because there's so much order in our universe. It's much more difficult to believe that God doesn't exist than to believe that God, a creator with order, exists. So Father Facing, now we're going to finish with a song.
Madre, estoy aquí, quiero rezar, te quiero hablar. Buena madre has sido tú, con sencillez, creyente fiel. En tu regazo quiero estar.
decir lo del...
Sí, que recordar que quien
I just wanted to remind everyone that whoever wanted this, if anyone wants to send like a petition to ask for prayers, whatever, you can send it to our email address. And I'm going to place on the chat right now the email address.
El Señor esté con vosotros. Y la bendición de Dios Todopoderoso, Padre, Hijo y Espíritu Santo, descienda sobre vosotros y permanezca para siempre. Podéis ir en paz. Hasta el domingo próximo, si Dios quiere.